From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Ticats Today with Steve Milton.
It's Wednesday, May 22nd. This is Ticats Today, and I'm Steve Milton. In this episode, among other things, we'll talk with Scott Milanovich about whether this week has a different feel than week one of training camp did, and also his concern that injuries have impaired his staff's ability to get a good read on the tight end competition. Middle linebacker Kyle Wilson drops around to discuss his position, and I offer up a couple of Ticat examples of what constitutes true professionalism in football. Although CFL training camps are short, these are its dog days. The excitement of the black and gold game seems so long ago, and the first exhibition game is still 3 full days of practice, walkthrough, and intense meetings and film study away, which can seem like a lifetime. So naturally, we asked Milanovich whether there's a substantial difference between week one and week two, especially in all of this heat.
For sure. Guys are tired. More guys are nicked up. We're pushing them to fight through this period of time. Next week becomes, to some degree, a bit of a recovery week as you build up to the first game. So this is an important week for us in terms of, finding out what guys have the toughness to fight through, a little pain, a little bit of tiredness, and some uncomfort, and who we can count on, in the back 4 to 6 weeks of the season.
The top two quarterbacks, number one Bo Levi Mitchell and number two Taylor Powell, continued to look good today, although by no means perfect. Powell stepped up to start 9 games last year as a rookie, and in the offseason was given some homework assignments by Milanovich, who says the Eastern Michigan alum has responded very well to that.
Yeah, he's just taking the next step. There's a couple things that I want him to work on that I'm not going to share publicly, things that I think are weaknesses that he has, and he's embraced those and kind of done what we've asked him to try, and it's working for him. At times he's getting frustrated because he's probably not working with some of the veteran receivers, so there's more mistakes with that group, but he's doing a really good job. He's again, doing everything that we could ask of him. If something happens to Bo or the injury flares up again, I'm entirely ready to go and lead this team.
Unless there's an injury or a real surprise, the only quarterback competition is actually for the number 3 job between third-year CFLer Kevin Thompson and rookie Harrison Frost, neither of whom will play too much on Saturday against Ottawa here, but will likely see a lot of time against Toronto and Guelph the following Saturday. But there are deep, deep battles many other places on the field, including at linebacker, for both the Will, which is on the short side of the field where the retired Simone Lawrence played, and at Sam, which is on the wide side of the field. The Mike is the province of fourth-year Ticat Kyle Wilson. Mike means middle linebacker. Although he's a lock currently at middle, he started at Will for 10 games in Lawrence's absence in the 2022 season and played very well. If he needed, though, he could move outside if there are injuries. So what's the difference between playing the weak side and in the middle?
Well, the Will, more dependent on in coverage most of the time. The Mike is normally more dependent on in the run and communicating with the D-line. So that's probably just the biggest difference. So
you can catch the complete post-practice interviews with both Wilson and Scott Milanovich in the video section of ticats.ca. Now let me take a sidebar here to offer my condolences to the family of Ron Brewer, who died last week in Burlington. Brewer had an outstanding 10-year CFL linebacking career and was on that dominant defense, which led the Ticats to the 1967 Grey Cup title. He also played for Montreal and for Edmonton and had 2 stints with Toronto where he had grown up. In fact, in 1973, he was named to the All-Argo team for the modern era. He was an East All-Star 3 times and was part of that extraordinary 1967 Ticat defense, which did not allow a single touchdown in their final 6 games, including the playoffs and the Grey Cup. Now, speaking of those 1967 legends, one of the candidates in the battle for offensive tackle here this week is a rookie named Quentin Barrow. I asked him if he knew the significance of the Barrow name in Hamilton. John Barrow, of course, played offensive tackle and defensive tackle for the Ticats in their most glorious era and is in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame and on the Ticats Wall of Honor, which is arguably harder to make than the Hall of Fame. Quentin Barrow, who was with the number 1 offense in today's practice, went to Grand Valley State, the same school as offensive guard Brandon Revenberg. He didn't know the history or even the name of John Barrow, but says he'll definitely look it up now. And in case you're wondering, there is nobody named Mosca nor Henley on the roster. But there is a Smith, And earlier this week, we talked about with third-year receiver Kiondré Smith. He wants to thicken his portfolio by adding punt returning. But what I'd like to talk about concerning Smith at the moment is the kind of professionalism that elite athletes have to have, but that the public never hears about or sees. After fumbling in the East semifinal last year, which the Ticats lost in Montreal, Smith asked the team's video staff to put together a collage of other fumbles across the CFL over the past couple of years, including his own. And then he studied them intently, looking for tendencies and similarities, all in the name of prevention. That had to be painful, though, coming off a disappointing loss. But he reviewed the film several times, and there were 92 different fumbles to analyze. Among other things, he found that 3 of the 4 fumbles he made came as he was tackled and putting his free arm down towards the ground, and the ball was punched out of his other hand from in front, not by a trailing tackler trying to strip him of the ball from behind, which has become the norm in the CFL. Correcting that was one of his off-season projects. Professionalism is so often in the minute details. And while we're on the topic of the game within the head within the game and what professionalism entails, one of the battles to pay close attention to in Saturday's exhibition game against Ottawa is at punter. Norwegian-born Corey Vedvik against Australian-born Bailey Flint. Vedvik, we recall, was obtained in a trade last summer after Flint had to leave the team for personal reasons. We talked with Flint earlier this week in a Ticats Today video I encourage all of you to watch. But one of the things that didn't make that episode was Flint's attitude towards competition. The guys in what's called the operation, that's place kicker Mark Leggio, long snapper Gordon White, and the 2 punters are a tight group, even though the 2 punters are fighting head-to-head for jobs in what all the coaches say will be an intense competition until, essentially, the season opens. That could easily have turned nasty and cold, but the 2 global players talk to each other a lot, and they talk warmly. They're side by side before every practice. Flint says this, and I'll quote him on this, quote, "You get to make your own decision on how you want to compete with somebody. You want to be a pain in their asses? You can do that. But what's that going to do for you? I'm not making the decision at the end of the day. All I can do is control what I can control." Yeah, that's the end of the quote. He says he wants to learn from Vedvik, who's played for 10 different pro organizations, so he asks him a lot of questions. He says that either way, he helps the team. If he's not better than Vedvik, he's not going to be here. And if he is, he will be here. He calls that a team-first mentality. One last look at a position battle, tight end. Scott Milanovich wants to install an NFL-style tight end package to add variety and unpredictability to the offense. But because of injury, only one of the 3 true tight ends in camp, Michael Ezek, was available for Sunday night's controlled scrimmage. Now, 6'8", Giovanni Robinson, the former basketball player, has since got back into practice, and Cameron McDonald was in the uniform today, but could only do walkthroughs. And Milanovich seemed a bit stymied by all of that. At times, he's had to use a hybrid package with fullback types and even a wide receiver or 2 playing tight end in practice.
Yeah, no, it's a little frustrating at this point just because we haven't had them. You know, one of the things we talked about is availability, and that's an important way that we assess players, and there hasn't been a ton of availability for the tight ends. So we'll have a counter plan, but it's getting to the point where those guys need to show what they're doing.
And finally, a couple of notes, our cat's clauses, if you will, at receiver. 6'6", TJ Vasher was back with the number 1 unit today, and Shamar Bridges looked good once again on the outside of the weak side of the field. In the secondary, Richard Leonard made his 2nd interception in 2 days, and Ante Litre continued to show his versatility at running back, even at tight end. That's it from the press box and on the sidelines at McMaster, and thanks once again for tuning in. We appreciate you spending your time with us. Check in tomorrow when we'll update you on Thursday's practice. This has been Ticats Today, and I'm Steve Milton.
This has been Ticats Today with Steve Milton. Catch it on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Do you know any kids who would like to dance at a Tiger Cats game? Then listen carefully, because back for preseason, the Ticats Dance and Cheer team is hosting their junior camp. They're welcoming youth ages 5 to 15 to join them for a practice and a special halftime performance on Tim Hortons Field for the upcoming Next Generation preseason game. No dance experience required. Registration is open at ticats.ca/junior dance or follow @DanceCheerTicats on Instagram for details.